6:30, we'll call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum. First item on the workshop is discussion of police recruitment.
Linda has a presentation for you tonight. So we have experienced a significant turnover rate, and so we want to bring some options to the council to consider to try to get that turnover rate down. Decrease.
So let's start off and just kind of talk a little bit about the police department and kind of what's going on. Right now, we have 158 sworn police officer positions in the police department. Council also approved 3 officers for an overfill that, should we ever get full, that we could fill, but we're a long way from being full. Out of those 158 sworn positions, 15 of those are vacant right now. We also have an officer that's retiring in September, and we have another officer that's in the process with Little Elm right now. So that could be 17 pretty quickly. We carry those vacancies throughout the department. Right now we have 1 traffic officer that's vacant. We have 5 street crimes officers that are vacant, 1 narcotics position, and then 8 of those are in patrol. And beyond just those 15 vacancies, right now we have 1 recruit in the academy. So the academy is 19 weeks, so they're still in the academy. Then we have an additional recruit that's in the FTO program. The FTO, the field training officer program, once they graduate, then they ride out with our police officers. That can take 4 additional months before we actually have them on the street. So this has been an ongoing problem. We've had recruitment issues for several years, but it's now reached a critical point. 15, soon to be 17, is really putting us in a serious position. So this year we've done quite a few things to try to increase recruitment. The police department recruiting the background officers, some of their staff actually went to Fort Hood and did some recruiting for people coming out of the military. This year we've tested in March, April, May, June, and July. We just tested on this last Friday. We actually are in the process of creating a Facebook page. We've done some recruitment, sent some recruitment out on the City of Louisville Facebook page, but the department feels like those people that are looking for a police job might gravitate more to a specific Facebook page. So those are some things that we've done.
How did the Fort Hood deal work out?
We didn't get anyone come here to test. We're going to talk about maybe a mobile test a little bit later, but we do hire a lot of ex-military people. That's one of our best recruitment areas. But it's not just a Louisville problem. If you'll see this chart, all of the cities are, as you can imagine right now, there are a lot of people maybe don't want to be police officers right now. But in Louisville, if you look at this chart, we're showing you each of our 16 survey cities, what their authorized number of police officers are, the number of vacancies they had on the day we called, and then what that percentage vacant. So we are leading the pack right now with 9.5%. But you can see Flower Mound's right below us at 9%, and then Carrollton at 7.8%. So one point I wanted to make with this slide, of the 16 survey cities, we need 291 police officers. So we're all out there competing for those same good candidates for police officers. So that makes it a little more difficult. One of the, so just kind of talk a little bit about our hiring and give you an idea of that process. I just pulled the last 3 years. You can see each of those 3 years. And you see that we've actually received 2,236 applications. But then notice of that, only 646 have tested. A couple of reasons for that. Number one, when people apply, there's actually some background questions that they have to answer through the application process. And HR screens those. So if they admit to certain things that are against our background, we send them a letter and say, you're not qualified. And then we send them a copy of the personal history statement and the polygraph booklet that they have to fill out as part of the background. They bring that with them to the test. So sometimes when they get that document, they start filling it out, they realize, oh, maybe I had a DWI. you've had a DWI, you can't be a police officer. So there's certain things that they look at. So I think that reduces the number that actually show up for the test.
Quick
So-
question.
Yes,
What's the most common early fallout reason?
abuse of past drug usage.
Okay.
It's very hard to find someone that has never done cocaine, anything illegal, steroids, marijuana right now, if they can't have done that in 5 years. So it's usually drug usage. Now, so
Excuse me, does the DWI have a time limit on it as well? Or is that ever?
So the city's policy is 5 years, but the police department's standard is ever. You cannot ever have had a DWI. And I think that's probably due to the liability of driving a car at fast speeds and,
And credibility.
yeah. So
That doesn't apply to drug use?
it does for, like even if you've only used cocaine one time, you can't be a police officer under the police background standards
For 5 years?
forever.
Ever, okay.
Yeah. So of those, the number that actually test, 62% of them pass the test. It's a written general knowledge test. We want to make sure that when we send someone to the academy that they can pass that state licensing test, so that's the reason for the testing. And then of the percent that pass that, only 87% of those pass the physical ability test. And then from there, we start really doing the real background, and they have to go through a polygraph, they have to do a psychological, there's a lot of testing that's required by the state to get licensed as a police officer. And so at that point of the 349, we've only hired 25 of those. So basically, we're hiring 1% of the people that test, and 3.8% of 1% of the people that apply, and 3.8% of the people that test. And then even more troubling than that, of that small percentage we hire, we lose 32% of those right now. And that's been our average for the last few years. And that's due to a lot of people think they want to be police officers. They go through the police academy, they get into the FTO program. They either can't do it, or once they get into it, they decide this isn't for me and they leave. So that's just something that we also have to deal with. We try to take all the precautions, the psychological, we encourage them to ride out. We do all these things hoping that they know what they're getting into, but we still lose 32%.
Again, quick question, I know time's up element here, but that 32%, is that typical with other cities also? They're in the same problem?
I didn't check that stat.
I haven't checked that either, so I'd be guessing.
I'd have to check that, but I don't know.
I would tell you, my experience in different cities, it's
I know.
tough in all cities.
Okay.
I knew that we see people often apply for us that didn't make someone else's FTO program, so that makes me think that it happens everywhere. And typically, if they don't make someone else's, they're probably not gonna make ours, so sometimes we won't hire them either. But so, we wanted to look at what are other cities doing, and when you look at what some of the other cities are doing, I noticed if you've read in the paper, like Fort Worth has stolen many Dallas police officers, and the way they're doing that is they're offering lateral transfers. So they're giving people credit for their experience in other cities. So this is the list of our current survey cities that are offering laterals. And you can see that 8 of our survey cities are already doing that, and Allen's in the same boat we are now. They're looking at doing that. Plus, outside our survey cities, you've got several other cities very near to us that are also offering lateral transfers. So what if the city of Louisville wanted to offer laterals? What are some of the things we would want to consider? So the police department actually went out and talked to their officers about all of this in recruitment. So a lot of this data you're getting comes from surveying the officers and things that they actually thought would help us improve our recruitment. And one of the things they overwhelmingly supported was lateral transfers. But when we looked at that, we had to have certain parameters. And so the department decided that someone's experience would be of value to us if they came from a city that had a population of 50,000 or more. And then secondly, Or if they weren't from a municipality, if they came from an entity that employed 100 officers or more. So that would be like DART or large universities that have police departments. So that would be our criteria if we were gonna do lateral transfers. The cost of a lateral transfer between someone coming in at step, as a certified officer, if they had the 5 years experience, we would start them, the cost of salary and benefits would be $15,800 for each one we brought in from a lateral transfer. We could absorb that through salary savings because we've had so many vacancies, so it wouldn't be an additional item that needed to be funded out of this year's budget. One thing you have to think about too, when we hire someone that's not certified, we send them to the academy. That costs $1,800 for their tuition, and then we have to buy them uniforms for the academy. And then, as I mentioned, they're in that academy for 19 weeks. So we spend $24,000 on their salary just for them while they're going through the academy. So it's almost a wash there for that first, or it is a savings that first year. So we would bring them in, but they would not have seniority, and that's obviously important to our police officers because seniority is how they bid for shifts, and there's some perks that go along with seniority. So their pay would be commensurate with their experience, but not their seniority. So this is our pay plan right now. So we bring people in, the recruits, and they stay at step 1. Once they finish the academy, successfully finish the FTO program, they go to step 2, and then they go to step 3 after a year, and then by the time they reach step 7, they have their 5 years. So we would bring people over based on their years' experience that correlates with this pay plan. Now, just one note, they don't automatically move through based on their years of experience. We do, we marry that step system with performance. So their performance evaluation has to be satisfactory, and they have to pass a test over general knowledge over the penal code and the general orders. So, another consideration we looked at, if we were gonna do this, we wanted to go back and look at the officers that we hired in the last 5 years. We don't wanna create another internal equity that would create a morale problem. So I went back and looked at we hired 38 officers in the last 5 years. Of that 38 officers, only 2 would have gotten moved. So that tells me a couple of things. Number one, we're not competing well for certified officers. Makes sense, we're not offering laterals, so nobody's gonna take that pay cut. The 2 that would be affected, we had 1 police officer that was already on step 7, and he had to go home to another state to take care of a sick family member. When that got resolved, he came back and had to start over again. So his salary would be adjusted. The second person that would be affected is an officer that we hired from Dallas. And so he had over 5 years at Dallas, so his salary would be adjusted. We do have 1 officer that we've offered a position that we're hiring from DART. Now, when I put this together, he hadn't started, but I found out he started last Wednesday. So he had 3 years at DART, so he would start on step 3. So we would want to make those adjustments to make sure that we're treating everyone fair and maintaining that internal equity. So, I wanted to give you worst case scenario. Let's say we were fortunate enough to be able to hire all 15 vacancies right now and bring them all in with over 5 years experience. The maximum cost would be $237,000. I don't think that's likely that we would be able to do that, but I wanted to show you worst case scenario. And then you can see if we only hired 4 and they were at step 7. Now remember, like this DART officer, he's only starting at step 3. So this is worst case scenario, or best case if you wanted to see, the person that had the most experience. So this is going to fix the problem, hopefully, of helping us to find those very qualified people that are already experienced. But there's that whole other applicant pool out there of that military, ex-military, the people that are transitioning out of the military. Then you also have kids that go to college and they get their degrees in criminal justice, and those are good quality applicants. So what can we do to compete for those applicants too? So one of the things we came up with was a temporary hiring incentive. So we looked at those people coming in, if we could give them an extra $1,000 when we hire them, that would help them move to Louisville, maybe pay that first month apartment rent or deposit or get their utilities turned on. So we would give them $1,000 when they were hired, and then $1,000 on their anniversary date every year for 5 years to give that incentive for them to stay. And this would be something we would only advertise per testing cycle. So when we were really hurting, like we are right now, we advertised, we would make this incentive. This wouldn't be something that we would say we want to do from now on. It would only be when we're in this crisis situation.
And Melinda, we are seeing other cities that are
Are doing
using
these type of things. Dallas did it for a long time. So, yeah, this is not
This is
out
not
of the
uncommon.
uncommon. But we could control this again by the available budget, what we have. And again, this would be absorbed through the police salary savings that we've had from all of these vacancies we're carrying. So let's talk about some other things we can do. I mentioned to you when we went to Fort Hood, the police department feels like if we were able, when we were at Fort Hood, to be able to give the written, which we can do, but then immediately follow up and give the physical ability test, that would get us more applicants. The problem with that, our physical ability test right now is done out at the police and fire training facility, and it's fixed equipment. We can't pick that up and move it. So we could look at a new physical ability that we could have validated. We'd have to hire a third party that would be movable. One thing that's going on in the Metroplex right now, there's been a couple of lawsuits filed for people challenging physical ability tests. Ours is good. We had a validation study. There's a large number of cities in the Metroplex that have joined together, and they are looking at doing an RFP for a big group process, and the police department they're exploring that opportunity. So this is an option that we could do also from salary savings. I think last time it cost us about $20,000 to go through that validation study, to get a third party to validate it and make sure that we were good in the court system should we get challenged.
This would be more like a Cooper's type test.
You know, maybe more, right now we use a lot of equipment. They run upstairs, they use a machine that tests force, to push, to pull. So it would be something that we could move. The second thing, and this is just, I don't know how popular this would be at the police department, but you know, I mentioned to you that we have an officer right now that is in the Little Lamb process. They came to HR last week and looked at their background, which was clean, so there'll be no reason for them not to hire them. And I asked Chief Deaver to talk to him and see, you've been here a year, what is it, why are you wanting to leave? And it is because Little Elm has rotating weekends off. Our department right now has fixed shifts, so if you're a low man on the totem pole on the bid shift, you're gonna work every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Some other departments have that rotating weekends off, where everybody works one weekend, they're off the next weekend. So this is just something we can look at. Chief Kerbo will have to look at that, you know, the pros and cons. How much morale will we lose versus how much will that help us in the future? And then the other thing that's not in your, that just kind of something that we kicked around this weekend when we were looking at budget, when Gina and I were working. You know, I talked to y'all a while back about how we set our pay structure and that we're a lag structure. Remember when we talked about we survey the market every year, and we're surveying the salaries as they are today. And then we project how far we are from market, and we move to the 50th percentile, the average of all those 16 cities. But what happens, we move that salary to that new place on October 1st, and when we do that, all the other cities move. So just for this year, what I kind of wanted to show you, so we moved last year to the midpoint, or to the average. So you can see we're barely over Dallas, but Coppell, Allen, and Grapevine are the only ones that make less than our police officers. So how do you fix that? Well, one thing that we looked at, and you will see it in the budget proposal, we put it on the unfunded list, just something to think about. If we added 1% to that, what would that do? So instead of moving the pay plan 3.3, what if we moved it 4.3%? If we did that, it would be up where that yellow is. So when everybody else moved, we wouldn't move all the way to the bottom. We would probably move more to become a lead instead of being a lag city. If we did 2%, that would be the pink. So we're going to give you those numbers we'll talk about that the budget hearing, you'll see that on the unfunded list. It's just another thing to think about, and we did that, for police and fire, and then we added in, 1% in general government. So I just wanted to give you some food for thought, so you could kind of see how that worked before you see it at the budget meeting on the 13th. And that is all. Any questions?
Go ahead. I've got several.
So if I have somebody come over from a lateral structure and then everything I saw here assumed that their years of service and their step would be the same. What happens if they're not?
So we're giving them full credit for a whole year. So if somebody had 3.5 years, they'd get 3 years. Is that what you're asking me?
No, I'm saying if somebody is in for 3 years, but they're actually step 2 because they failed a test or some of the merit
Well, I'm
components.
hoping
Oh,
that
within
would,
our own system?
No, yeah, well, within XYZ city
that's
system.
probably gonna come in on their background, because Russ is probably, Chief Curbo is probably not gonna hire someone, if they're lagging behind at their city, the police department, their backgrounds, they go and look at all their performance reviews, they have a very good network on the background. And if somebody's a problem somewhere else, we're not gonna bring them to be our problem. So we wouldn't offer someone a job who had performance issues. I mean, we don't want someone else's problems.
We don't do that now normally anyway. You
Yeah.
have a performance
No.
issue, they just don't make the cut.
We want only the very best qualified people.
Just as a comparison too, so in our system, we require that they test, they have to pass a test. We're different than most other cities. Most of our cities that we compare to are civil service, and they're not allowed to do that.
Okay.
I've got several questions. So they work 12-hour shifts, right? What is that, 5 12-hour shifts?
So
Or,
they have an 80-hour work period. Under state law, they get to have a longer work period. So they work, one of their shifts is an 8-hour day. The rest are 12-hour days. And that 8-hour day rotates every pay period based on whatever the needs are
Yeah, they work that out with their immediate supervisor.
with the supervisor. So they're gonna work, and so that every other Thursday, they work. So they work 4 days, they're off 3 days, they work 3 days, and they're off 4 days.
We went to 12-hour shifts 6 years ago. Chief, how long ago?
Oh, I think
It's
it's,
actually been longer than that.
Longer
It's
than
been
that,
about-
and I had
It's like 2 or 3 years before I got it.
But it's really a request by the officers to go to 12-hour shifts.
so when we're short 15 officers, these guys don't work and get overtime, we go with less coverage? Is that
no, there's a
correct?
minimum staffing number, so if there's a minimum in patrol, so if there's not enough officers to meet minimum staffing, they bring people in on overtime, so it does cost overtime.
Okay.
That's why they balance those vacancies by the other units, the, special operations unit.
That's where it really impacts us. You have to keep that minimum staffing on patrol. So all of a sudden, our special units go without staffing. And so
Okay.
that has a significant impact.
And one issue too, even with it is problematic on patrol. That's one of the things we're hearing. They can't get their vacation days when they want. They can't schedule their holidays because they are so short-staffed. They're not gonna give someone a vacation day if it's gonna take us down below minimum staffing. So that in itself becomes a morale issue.
Okay, drug question. So we say that somebody that does something like cocaine can never be hired. But that's not something that you can test for. So basically, we have to trust their honesty.
No,
We do a polygraph.
polygraph.
So whenever we do their background, every police officer, once they fill out that statement, their personal history statement, their polygraph, then they go to the polygrapher. So it'll come out on the polygraph. Now, usually if it comes out on the polygraph, then they go back and they admit to it. They tried to beat the system. So you get it from their admission after the polygraph or during the polygraph.
So has there ever been any thought to say, you got an 18-year-old kid that did some drugs, but then he joined the military, had discipline, got
Yeah.
cleaned up, he's now 30 years old, he hadn't done drugs in over
We review
12
those
years.
we review those background standards pretty regularly, and we will continue to do that. And so they have changed some over the years, and that may be something that we continue to do, that we're looking at.
I will tell you, at one time, if someone had admitted to use of marijuana, we wouldn't have hired them.
Ever.
Now, we couldn't hire anybody.
So we've kind of adjusted those, you know, it's a balance, because you don't,
Especially city attorney.
I pride ourselves at the city of Louisville that you don't see stories about our police or fire that are negative in the paper, because we do really good backgrounds. Some cities, when you just have to take what you get, you sometimes see problems. So it's a balance, and we're always struggling to make sure that we're finding that balance.
Yeah, and that's one thing we have to really look at here. We don't want to lower those standards because of this critical situation and cause more problems in the future. So we are looking at the background standards and try to make sure we're in line with most of the other cities that hire quality officers.
That was gonna be my question, is are we looking at that? And you're
Yes,
saying
we've
are.
looked
We're
at
looking
all
at
of that, and so that is part of what we're doing. We're looking at that too at the same
And
time.
I don't necessarily want to be at the 50th percentile of that chart, but,
No.
you know, I don't know that I need to be at the 100%.
Well, and you're not. I guarantee you that our background standards are in line with most of the other cities.
Okay.
So I guess the last question is, you're talking about the weekend situation. So how long, I mean, so basically somebody that's low man on the totem pole works every single weekend?
Yeah, and it's based on seniority, so it could be 5 years, but when we have 15 vacancies, obviously when these guys get hired, then that moves everybody up that seniority ladder. But,
So these are the people that, probably the younger officers, more closer to newlyweds, maybe even young
Absolutely.
children, and they work every single weekend?
yes.
It's a problem.
And late nights.
That's, yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
that would be
absolutely.
that would be grounds for divorce in a lot of
I
situations.
see the chiefs wanted to comment.
Yeah, and it's not like they don't know this going into it. I personally tell every recruit that I hire that you're gonna be on that fourth watch, which is that weekend and night shift, for 5 or 6 years before you can get to a different shift. And it still may only be days working weekends.
And the other thing to remember is the officers really chose this system. I mean, it's not like we mandated it. We tried to work with the officers to institute a system that's most acceptable to
And when
them.
we implemented it, the majority of the officers elected, this is what they wanted. We didn't really let them vote, but this was the preference. But, you know, as we're talking about now, it may get to where, I know if we were to force a change, there would be some unhappy ones, but hopefully, in the long run, for the best, it might be better. But again, that's something he's gotta look at.
So you let the officers vote, but you didn't let their significant.
We need to head on out front.
This is true.
Is there any questions on any of the agenda? We got 6 items and 3 of them are on the consent. Any questions on anything? Let's go out front then.